I find the subject of the floorboards underneath Notre Dame in France produced a sarcophagus over Easter weekend. I find that to be a very interesting story that I think is pretty darn important, if you ask me, considering the fact of how the fire happened in 2017, I want to say. Right around the time where we had the solar eclipse in the United States. And the cathedral will not be reopened until 2024, right when we have the next solar eclipse. So I find that interesting. That timing is very interesting. And for them to find a body underneath the floorboards of that massive cathedral on Easter weekend, you know, during resurrection time, it's quite interesting. And you get into the history of France, you have the Templars that went through there. And, you know, a lot of reports of the Holy Grail going through France. It might have ended up in France. I had no idea that, as Jacob and Israel pointed out, and I will show you, that they housed the crown of thorns that, you know, it's hard to tell if that is the ancient artifact or a representation of an ancient artifact. It's hard to tell. But look what he has to point out, Jacob and Israel, and I'll show you about that. It's very fascinating. Because everyone, when I Pet Goat was really big in 2015 through about 2017, the animated short that's just deeply, deeply symbolic, and I knew the second I saw that thing that there's something very deep being told to whoever's watching it, for only the eyes that could see it. But you know, the part where in I Pet Goat where basically the Antichrist is being birthed and the spire falls on a church in the background, that was identical to how Notre Dame, the spire fell when it was on fire. But nobody caught this with the crown of thorns, and Jacob and Israel caught it, and I will show you. So again, there's some very weird stuff going on in front of our eyes right now, and not many people are really catching it, but thankfully these guys are, there's guys and girls out there that are always watching. So, and there's some beautiful thinkers and people that just are looking so deeply into things that seem to be very meaningless, but have such deep connections to what is going on right now. So check it out, and thanks for watching.
London, they are Roman corporations. London, the city of the Lord. El, the sun, or Saturn. Paris, Swiss, Paris, for Isis. And what do you find in the center of Paris? Well, you find the Notre Dame. Who's the Notre Dame? Well, that's Isis. They're telling you. I mean, it's not hard. Now, Rome's an interesting story because Rome, when good old Babylon was destroyed, the priesthood, you know those cardinals, those guys dressed in red? Yeah, Babylon. That's why the whole thing's called Babylon the Great. Get out of her, my people, if you do not want to share with her in her sins, because you will. And we're going to talk about the remedy to get out of Babylon the Great. It's a system of shit served up as freedom for you. Just get a birth certificate and join the corporation and get on the citizenship.
Of the New Testament are all claimed to be buried now in France. They all came to France, or, you know, Spain, whatever, in the area, and they're all there. Like, all of them. We're going to find all the relics are there. We're going to find the stories are there. We're going to find the names are there. We're going to find everything, if we look for it, is all linking to France. So that's going to be the presentation today. I'm trying to tie all this together in some form. I'm going to do it as an audio presentation from now on, because there's no point you just staring at me. I put some few images on the screen once in a while. And it's easier for me to do audio because then I can stop easier and cut it. So let's begin our audio presentation of the final conclusion of our Southern France Mystery Series. So we need to begin with this particular map. This particular map is one of the first key elements that we're talking about. And the first things that really clued into me when I began this research, I guess I started around 2002, 2003 is when I first actually began the research. And, of course, didn't take it into the next level until maybe 2012, 2013. But I remember looking into a lot of stuff that seems to have disappeared from the internet, that I was looking through it around 2006, 2007, and then a lot of the stuff is just gone. But I got pretty clear that when you start seeing the names Jesus of Galilee and Jesus of Nazareth, which in one sense make no sense. The guy's born in Bethlehem, but he's being labeled with these two other names that really have no sense at all. When you begin to see that we are talking about Jesus of Gallia and Jesus of Narbonensis, Jesus of Narbonne, now it all begins. It was like an instant arrow. Okay, we've got our marker point. And the map you're looking at here is where we'll start. This was the area of Gaul, and Gaul in totality took like 5 or 6 provinces. It was all of France, a little bit of what's now Spain, a bit of Italy, Switzerland, small bits of Germany, and this was all known as Gaul. And there were 5 key parts to Gaul, which was Gallia Belgica, Gallia Celtica, which is the largest part, Gallia Cisalpina, Gallia Anticania, and our most important one, Gallia Narbonensis. Now, of course, we've already got the word Narbonne for Narbonne for that particular city, and you've got the Esses at the end meaning Isis. So we're already linking Narbonne and Isis right in the name. And we're going to see that this is going to open up a tremendous doorway of exploration and potential understanding that France is the Holy Land. Now, like I say, someone else recently came up with a similar presentation, and that's on the Stolen History. There's a huge thread on the Stolen History site. A gentleman named Alexei Khrushletov. The link is below. You can look at what he's presenting there. However, I think a lot of his material, of whatever he's presenting, actually comes from from a Hungarian gentleman named Alexei Rushtalov. And he has a YouTube video, which has been translated into English. That link is also below, which is called The Decoding of the Bible, France, the Cradle of Christianity, 2008. I haven't watched the video in complete detail because when I was going through and seeing pieces of it, it was pretty much the same as I was seeing in this thread on Stolen History. And like I say, there's lots of information in there. They're trying to link the names of the Bible more to northern France. I'm trying to link them more to southern France. Which one of us is correct, who knows? But the point being is that we both have the same thesis. And the thesis of Khrushchev, which is very interesting, is that Paris becomes Jerusalem. And I really began to have a secondary overlay when you began to see if Paris is Jerusalem. And it begins to start, as we'll eventually get into taking to the time frame. If this is true, and of course I can't prove it, but if this presentation is true, and we're dealing with France being the story of the New Testament, well, when does this actually happen? Does it really occur in the equivalent year 0 of our particular calendar? Probably not. Does it occur maybe much longer ago, 4, 5, 10,000 years, perhaps in the past, and that story had just actually moved along through history, through all the various religions, be they ancient Egypt, because ancient Egypt has much of the New Testament story already. So I had always seen this as kind of being originally an Egyptian story that was passed through into, Persian, and the stories of Mithras in Greece, and the stories of Bacchus, and the stories of all the way through, and eventually the Gnostic Gospels became the New Testament. And this is the sort of theory I'd always had. But as I began to think about it, there's no reason why, if France isn't the origin of this, that this couldn't have been long ago, 50,000 years ago, even some massive time in history. And eventually that story got passed into ancient Egypt and then through the rest of the world, and eventually translated into you could say that what we have as a New Testament is an updated version of this French story, trying to place it all in the Middle East in order to try to hide what's really going on. But of course, as you're going to see, you can't hide it. You can't hide the story. The story is too clear. It's too obvious. Once we go through it all, it's going to take some time. The other time frame we've got, if you don't want to, if we can push it much closer to us. So if we take like the flamenco ideas and we lose 1,000 years of history, so our 2,000 years from zero really are 1,000 years, starting in what our year 1,000 would be, then perhaps you're talking about a story that's happening 1,000 years ago, maybe less, 800-900 years ago, which puts the entire events of this time frame in the exact same time frame as being presented for the Cathars and the Knights Templar, which might mean that there isn't this massive overlay of 1,000 years between whatever happened with the New Testament story and what happens with the Cathars and the Knights Templar, that they are literally contemporary with each other. It's part of the exact same story going on at the exact same time in the exact same place. And if Jerusalem is not Jerusalem in the Middle East, but Paris, then you have to wonder, why are the Knights Templar supposedly being founded and going to the Holy Land and sitting in Jerusalem and digging for stuff? Because there should be nothing to find there. If they're going anywhere to dig, they're going to Paris. Which would make more sense, that you could easily send 7 local French knights and not have to transport them halfway around the world. You just send them to Paris, and you find what you need to find that's been buried or hidden in Paris. That makes complete sense. It'll go through the stories of Helen, the mother of Constantine, who supposedly did this crazy stuff when she was the age of 80. We're going to look through the Mary Magdalene, Saint Lazarus, a ton of others, Pontius Pilate, all who are buried in France. Their tombs are in France. So let's begin. So the cathedral was sealed in lead. It was at the very base of, like, they found this thing because they're in the midst of construction, because you know that it just burnt down a little while ago. I did programs about that and how it's connected to the crown of thorns, because the one thing that they actually recovered from it was the crown of thorns. That's right, believe it or not. Supposedly that place housed the literal crown of thorns that Jesus had, and they turned it into some kind of this thing. So it was there, but when the Notre Dame Cathedral burnt down, which was just a couple of years ago, one of the things that they saved and they made a big deal of talking about was the crown of thorns, like as if it was a great thing. I said, of course the beast system would be focused on the crown of thorns. A crown is symbolic of an authority, a rule, right? We got the virus of the crown. We're given the crown of Christ to rule and reign with him, but of course there's a virus because people are sick today. They don't have faith today. People have given up on God today. This crown of thorns was thrust upon Jesus right before he went to the cross. Big deal. Crown of thorns. It's a big deal. Very symbolic, because if you've watched the show long enough, if you haven't, you should subscribe to my website, jacobisrael.com. I think it's in this corner. I don't know where it is, but you should subscribe there, because then we can stay connected and everything else. It's free. But I have plenty of essays about what the crown of thorns was. Paul was given a thorn in his flesh. Adam, when he was cast out of the garden, the ground only produced thorns. Jesus revealed what the crown of thorns, symbolic of an authority, a rule of thorns was. You want to know what the thorn is? People didn't know what Paul's thorn is. Very simple. A sower goes out into the field. He sows seed. Some of it falls among thorns. The thorns grow up, strangle the seed. And he says to his disciples, Jesus said, the thorns are the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches. We worry about everything that's going on in the world.
right? We worry about, oh, but if we have enough money, we'll be okay. We put our faith in the system, and we're ruled by the system, and yet it's our suffering. And we got to worry, and we got to care, and that's the thorn. And that's what was thrust on Jesus right before he was put to death. He took upon himself the sins of the world, the cares of the world, the sins of the world, us, what we worry about. So the fact that the crown of thorns was saved from Notre Dame Cathedral, not a great thing. But of course the beast system would be after it because that's what they want. You know, they want that control. You know, there's a little spooky tie-in to that animated movie from a while back called I Pet Goat 2, where that cosmic Jesus was coming out and everything was, you know, changing. And you see this, it looked like Notre Dame Cathedral was burning, and it was, the spire falls, and it falls in such a way, it looks just like when the Notre Dame Cathedral fell. And at that moment in that video, you see the crown of thorns that cosmic Jesus was wearing disappear. So it's quite strange that the crown of thorns in Notre Dame Cathedral disappears at the same time. Now it's stored in the Louvre. Telling you all of this because all of this is linked to something else. So if you're new to the channel, you should watch till the end of the show. I have to lay the groundwork.
One of those saints on the cathedral. There were 16 sculptures, and these fuckers cut the heads off every one of them in broad daylight, and they wanted the media to see. Now, these statues were arranged like this, one on every four corners, or one on each corner. This is that pagan cross we were talking about. And not only that, but they were actually built on a cherubim. And we're going to cover that in a sec. But at the very base, I just want you to kind of get the pattern here, that at the very base, you have the animal, and then you have three different saints rising in veneration above them. And you see how all these saints are looking down. Most of the saints are looking down, with the exception of St. Thomas, which is just beautiful if you know his work. It's just like, yeah, of course it'd be you, dude. Of course it'd be you, you badass. The revised instructions lay out in detail how, okay. Now, before we get that, okay, James, we should have put this one first. I want to remind you all that when these things were beheaded, not only was it during the daytime, but they broadcast the rapture right on TV for you to see. Right? And this is the rapture, right? You're seeing this. And notice the scaffolding. And notice how, as they raise these things, oops, we don't need to see that. I want you to notice how out in the open these things were done. It was in the middle of the day. The media was invited. The statues were not covered. They were not wrapped in any kind of protective way. In fact, they were vandalized. Their heads were removed. Well, James, this is how you get to the structure. You know, you have to get to the iron core structure inside. It's the only way you could move them. And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. I guess they didn't have the ability to put this on a stand inside a protective box. I guess they didn't have the ability to do that, right? That around all this scaffolding, they lacked the technology. They didn't have a crane. Well, okay, I guess they had this crane. But that they never would have had the way of building a protective cage. You know, like when the crane lifts it up, if the wind happens to go insane or something, and it was to smash it into the side. No, they did it this way. No, we have to cut the heads off all of them. Every one of them.
Bring out the capstone to shouts of God bless it, God bless it. By the way, the capstone, of course, is the head of Christ. Christ. We're supposed to be the body of Christ. We're given the name of Christ. We're supposed to take on the mind of Christ. That's the head of Christ. That's the capstone. It's rested his head on a stone. The capstone. It's Christ. By the way, the Stone of Destiny, I got to finish that show. I'm going to go into New York and I'm going to find that place. I can't wait to share that show. So Zechariah asks, I asked the angel, what are the two olive trees and on the right and the left of the lampstand? And again, I asked him, what are the two olive branches beside the gold pipes? He says, you don't know who these are? No, my Lord, I said. So he said, these are the two anointed to serve the Lord, the witnesses of God. This is us. So here we are. He's shown that the witnesses of God are going to stand up. Then he's shown this in chapter 5. Then Zechariah is shown this in chapter 5. It's called the flying scroll. I looked again, and there before me was a flying scroll. Right, it's kind of like it's been written in the stars, if you will. He asked me, what do you see? And I answered, a flying scroll, 20 cubits long and 10 cubits wide. And he said to me, this, what have we been talking about on the show? That God is going to curse the wicked, that the curse is going out, right? The cursed stones we just found that were revealed, the cursed tablets on Mount Ebal. Talked about God's curse going out, right? We talked about this. That's why this is strange to me. You'll see. I see a flying scroll, he said. And he said to me, this is the curse that is going out over the whole land. For according to what it says on one side, listen to this, every thief will be banished. And according to what it says on the other side, everyone who swears falsely will be banished. In other words, people that are lying, people that are stealing the beast system, they're going to be banished. This is the day there's a curse that has gone out into the world, and it is going to get rid of the liars and those who swear falsely and those who steal. The Lord Almighty declares, I will send it out, and it will enter the house of the thief and the house of anyone who swears falsely by my name. People that say, God told me this, God told me that. The beast system, Notre Dame Cathedral, right? Like as if that's where you're going to find God. Let me tell you where you find God. Just close your eyes and ask, you got God right with you. There's nowhere God is not. You don't need to go to no fancy building. Listen to them lie to you. It will remain in that house and destroy it completely, both the timbers and the stones. God's saying, I'm going to destroy the system. That house that you're going to see, then the angel who was speaking to me said, look up, see what's happening. And I asked, what is it? So here Zechariah is like, well, he's having a dream. And he records the dream. Look up, what do you see? And what he saw was, it is an ephah. This translation calls it a basket. But it's a big basket. Most scholarly insight says it should be called a casket. It should be called a sarcophagus. It's a tomb. Because the tomb is flying between heaven and earth. It's the grave. He replied, it is We'll call it a casket. It's a casket, a sarcophagus. And he added, this casket that you see is the iniquity of the people. The iniquity of the people throughout the land. So God's showing Zechariah, here are going to be the witnesses. They're going to come out. They're going to start spreading the word of God. And he goes, now look at this. You see this right over here? That's the iniquity of the people. That's how corrupt this world has become.
Perhaps during the plays, we have discussed many times the technology of belief. The book that I wrote discusses in detail the needles of Cleopatra, the 13 obelisks that travel to Rome, the ritual of Osiris, which is the falling and the rising of man. It is the resurrection, and that erection is not a coincidence in phonetics. The ritual of Osiris is Osiris was entered into a coffin. There's some speculation as to why. Some say he did it on only a few know like me that he did it on purpose. Some say he was tricked. Doesn't matter. His body was dismembered into a certain number of pieces. Someone in the comments might tell you that number like they know, but seriously, sometimes it's 19, sometimes it's like 41, sometimes it's 13, sometimes it's 32, which I've never read any translation that said that, or 33, but anyway, the point is his body's chopped up into pieces and it's spread. And then people start to agree again, because ISIS collects those pieces. Mary preserves and watches over the body, and she brings the body together into its parts, save one. Save his penis. The penis of Osiris is not found. It's gone. And she constructs a golden phallus, and that golden phallus is erected on the body of Osiris. And Isis seats herself upon his mercy seat, and a new world is reborn. That is the story. That is the mythology, and it's a constant repeating ritual, and it embodies all the principles of thermodynamics, of batteries, of any kind of power transaction. The gating of that power is encoded into this message.
We live in cycles, and this is what the churches don't want you to know. We live in one cycle is a 24,000-year cycle called precession. And what happens is we go in the summer and the winter of precession, just like any other season, day and night. As the sun goes around through the 12 signs of the zodiac, it brings us through new ages. It spends 2,000 years in the sign. It's been in the sign of Pisces for 2,000 years, and it's entering the age of Aquarius, which will bring change, spiritual change, great spiritual change and consciousness. And we're receiving the benefit of that now. We're going through the dragon's breath. Every time Aquarius comes, Aquarius is the man. There's only one man standing there. Okay, Gemini is a couple of twins. There's Virgo, she's a woman. The rest is animals and all sorts of creatures. But there's one man, Aquarius, he's got the water, and he's pouring it down. Those are spiritual waters, because Aquarius is a fixed air sign, and air is mind. You see, Pisces, the two fish, one doubts and one believes. We've been in the church of doubting and believing for 2,000 years. Oh, believe in Jesus, you'll be saved. Oh, I doubt. Don't doubt, brother. Believe, doubt, believe, doubt. Aquarius, the motto of Aquarius is I know. Hey, that's why we're knowing. We're knowing all this now and waking up. It's the
Evil in man, the corruption in man is going to be dealt with. But it has to be revealed first. So here it's being revealed. The wickedness, the nine-tailed fox, the whore of Babylon, right? That wicked spirit that's in the world that we've been talking about. And how it's making its last stand.
Are we ready for a new world order?
things are so hard right now. That's why things are so spooky right now. That's why you're being pumped with nonstop fear. But we have nothing to fear. So long as we love others, we forgive others, and we're patient, and we have faith in more. Regardless of what people say, there is a God. And the God of Jacob, my God, the God that I pray to, you should pray to. Ask for the truth. It's the only freedom that you're going to find is by knowing God, because he's done with this place. He's done with how corrupt these people are. He's done with how just ungodly these people are. All of these people working together to try to prove that there is no God. This is the beast that's literally standing in the temple declaring himself to be God.
Do you believe in God?
No.
Under the calling of a rooster. And before you say, well, yeah, that's just how you move things, man. That in 2017, just a few years before, Vatican issues new rules on saint bones and other relics. The revised instructions lay out in detail how a body is to be unearthed, saying it must be covered with a decorous cloth while a relic is being taken or authenticated, and then reburied in clothes of similar style. They also make clear that the bishops involved must agree in writing to any transfer of remains and call for absolute secrecy when a body is unearthed and a relic taken for eventual veneration. And guys, it's not just body. The clothing of John Paul counts under these instructions. That it must be covered and that its transport must be a complete secrecy. Right? So you can't say that this is normal. That airlifting these guys is normal. In fact, you would call it sacrilegious unless you were doing something deeper. Unless you were performing a different kind of ritual. Because guys, you would just build a crater.
It was covered and sealed in lead. A casket, a sarcophagus, covered and sealed in lead. That's why Joe Sam sent that to me, because it's interesting. Basket sealed with lead. But Joe, you got no idea, dude. You got no idea how much more interesting this gets. Then the cover of lead was raised, and there in the basket sat, guess what? A woman. A nine-tailed fox. A whore of Babylon. Do you see? How long have we been talking about the corrupt carnal soul of mankind? The beast system? How long have we been talking about it? Of course, what's in this lead-sealed basket is a woman, the whore of Babylon, that sits on the many waters that the dragon is going to turn against. The cover of the lead was raised, and there in the basket sat a woman. Because once again, we're not talking about a literal basket. We're talking about something that they called an ephod. It was a big, big tomb, a sarcophagus, covered in lead, sealed in lead. It was opened in Zechariah's vision, and he saw a woman sitting in it, and he was told by the angels that it was the iniquity of the people, like Pandora's box being opened up. The box. Someone even on Twitter just shared all of these ancient gods carrying their little handbags.
The lead sarcophagus. And they didn't show a picture. They won't show us a picture of it right now. We have to wait. They just want us to know that he's been seen for the first time, right? For the first time in thousands of years, light is completely filling the cross of the cathedral. Do you understand that with this roof gone, this is all wood. All the yellow stuff here is wood. And that with that, all that wood gone, look how much light pours into the cathedral. it just pours in. And right below it, the body of Osiris. It's amazing how obvious, how out in the open, how in your face these things are. But yet, people are just driving to Starbucks. People are just buying Chromebooks.
And subsequent to this papal bull, which says basically, you can check it out on Wikipedia, Unum Sanctum, the papal bull, okay? Check it out on Wikipedia. It tells you that the Catholic Church basically put on that with blood, that they own the world, all the chattel, all the souls, all the titles of properties and everything, and that's that. And that's how they've been doing business with their Jesuit army ever since. And they turn up in court when you go to court and you think you're getting justice. You think you're on the land.
So, guess what was on top of the spire? Did you guys know this? Guess what was on top of the spire? St. Thomas was not on top of the spire, but St. Thomas was one of the 16 copper statues that were on the spire, that were on the obelisk. And St. Thomas is one of the few, he wasn't actually the only statue, but I think he was the only male, human statue to actually be looking directly up at the spire. The only one. And what was he looking at? A fricking rooster. He was looking at a rooster. I hope you guys are about to enjoy this. He was freaking looking at a rooster the whole time. And that rooster was destroyed in the fire, like a phoenix, right? And what does the rooster tell you? The rooster tells you about the golden dawn. The rooster tells you what's coming, right? The rooster makes the sound to alert the entire farm that it's time for mooring. And the rooster knows he's going to die in the announcement. The rooster knows he's meant to burn, and that this entire building was made for him. It was made for him. And the darkness that's been nestled in this cathedral is finally bursting forth from a hymen. It's a limestone hymen. The hymen wall of this evergreen roof collapsed.
Christ is within. In fact, Colossians 1:27, 26 and 27, where the Apostle Paul says, the sacred secret from all times that was hidden from your eyes is now being revealed to you. And that is the glory of the Christ within. What was he talking about? Well, he's talking about there's a sacred fluid that is produced in your cerebrum, in the pia mater portion, the holy portion of the brain, right? At the claustrum, otherwise known as the holy claustrum or Santa Claus. And it goes down into the midbrain. It hits the pineal gland and the pituitary gland. It gets differentiated there. The pineal sends an electric portion of that fluid down the pingala, and then the pituitary gland sends a magnetic portion down the pingala. It goes down to the sacrum here in the spine, and you have a nerve ending called the sacrum. Let's not use the word chakras because that's from the devil. Let's call them nerve endings or ganglion, and you'll find that in Gray's Anatomy. And I don't know whether Gray worshipped the devil or Sante or all those anatomists. So let's not disturb the Christians, shall we? That oil, otherwise known as Christos, the Christ within, goes down your spine after it's differentiated at these two glands, travels down the tree of life, which is the pneumogastric nervous system, feeding the lungs and the stomach, the tree of life. And then above that ganglion, there's the solar plexus. Remember that one, the fourth brain? That's called Bethlehem. Corresponds with Virgo in the zodiac. Bethlehem means the house of bread, because there is a seed born there, which is the bread of life. Jesus said, I am the bread of life. It's not talking about a historical person, it's talking about this inner science of how if you raise that oil and return it back to God by tithing, by giving 10% of it back, because if you squander that oil in riotous living like overeating and drinking and lots of stuff, you ruin it, you spoil it. It never goes up. The reason it must go up to touch the optic thalamus, this little egg that sits on top of the spine. And this is why the Pontifex Maximus has got his staff, and it's got a pineal gland or a pine cone on the end of it, because it's talking about the pineal gland at the top, right behind the optic thalamus. When the oil reaches there, you get Christed. That's the crucifixion. And what happens is that oil vibrates 1,000 times more than when it was down here. And guess what? It reactivates all the dormant brain cells in your brain. And you've got trillions of them. Alcohol kills brain cells. It's a killer. That's why they love alcohol and they tax it and everything like that. And they tell you, that marijuana's bad. Cannabis, they call it marijuana because that's a legal term and they can herd you into court and send you to jail for it. But cannabis, they can't. Cannabis is the God plant. It's alkaline. But they'll give you plenty of alcohol because that's poison and it'll kill that seed. You kill that seed. And you get 12 opportunities to raise that seed, because every month when the moon is in your sun sign, a psychophysical germ is planted in Bethlehem. There's a little indentation in that solar ganglion, and that's where the seed is born. And you have an opportunity when the moon is passing through your sun sign, in my case Aries, to abstain from sex and save that seed, and it'll go up and you'll be Christed, illuminated.
Coming of light is by being inside the vaulted darkness of this place. And even those ribs provide you that opportunity to feel communion with that kind of darkness. It's creepy, right? James is so dark. God, he's so dark. So I know it sounds creepy. And that's exactly why this cathedral has so many different hermetical seating areas, depending on who you are, depending on what you're about, right? And the oldest pagan symbol is the cross. The cross of Christianity was a gift from paganism. And before the first theist ever came along, there was a pagan one day who suddenly said, I am a theist. And then all the pagans around him said, hey, that sounds cool, man. Good to see you.
Go to church. Hey, you know what? You've got this trust that the Catholic has, and it owns your soul and everything like that. You know, when you pay all the bills with your, all the hard-earned money that you give as tax to the government, to the priests of Baal. Do you think the churches go to any one of these churches? Do you think any of those priests are telling them, "Hey, wake up! The Vatican owns your asses, and you're paying everything to the Vatican through the trusts"? You're in. Yeah, you reckon you're going to get that in church? The Jehovah's Witnesses never said that when I was there for 22 years, knocking on your door, helping you to find Jesus, because he's lost.